take it away, Kimwei.
Oh, thank you, Katie. And I've been so enjoying this evening. What a treat to have all of you present such deep relationships with words and with books. And I feel really privileged to be involved in this because, you know, it's really strange for me to be presenting something like this book, which it's impossible for me to engage with purely as a book, because I've engaged with it as an author, one of 30 of the authors. Is it one person per chapter, obviously, and also as a reader. So I've sort of been really immersed in it, and also getting to know some of the other authors through the process. And I think, you know, what I have to say about it is that when I first came out as non-binary in 2014, I didn't think it was a really relevant issue to anyone except for myself. You know, I didn't think it was a relevant issue to people who weren't part of the non-binary demographic. But what's really amazing about this book is that it focuses on intersecting identities. So it's basically choosing people from all walks of life who are also non-binary. And it's international, but there's also myself and another writer from Devon. So I wanted to focus on the two of us for this. And I'm going to read you a tiny little bit which sort of really explains my relationship with non-binary and how I came to be part of the book as well. So this is from a little section in my chapter. Do you see me? Nothing's binary. The song. Being non-binary transgender is something I've always found difficult to explain. It seemed so unfamiliar to anyone, so invisible, so different, something they couldn't relate to. Finally, the only thing to do was write a song simply called Nothing's Binary. And fellow non-binary musician Billy Bottle and I recorded it to coincide with Exeter Pride in May 2016. The tag read, "It's a song about being non-binary, but also celebrating LGBTQ+ as a whole." Well, a few thousand views later, we were thrilled that the message had been so deeply received. It turned out how I feel about being non-binary isn't difficult to relate to at all. I learned that expanding beyond the binary notion of gender is not just relevant to those who identify as transgender, but to everyone, because we are all affected by the expectations of a society that sees gender as binary. The song resonated with anyone seeking to be seen as they truly are, and we heard from people who feel unseen due to gender, race, disability, or because some other reason leaves them feeling judged and unacknowledged. I learned that when we see and accept each other, we love each other, and when we love each other, we change the world. So, for me, the experience of reading this book was really interesting because, you know, the idea of non-binary gender, it's a label that's defined by what it isn't. So it's very difficult to put one's finger on what it is. And the only thing really to do is to look at the experience of people who are non-binary. And, you know, throughout the book, I found myself kind of challenged in places by ideas that I thought, these are non-binary, this is non-binary, maybe many things, but it definitely is this, such as presentation. You know, I always felt like a presentation for me was a big part of being non-binary, and reading chapters by people who were saying, no, I don't tailor my presentation. I don't tailor what I wear. I don't tailor how I look whatsoever. My gender identity is fully internal. And so, like, at every point, I felt like my definitions of ideas about who I am and ideas about who other people are were challenged. And I sort of feel like now is an important time where everybody really needs that. And I think that, you know, I want to go to the second person who's from Devon, which is Al Head. And I was rereading their chapter today, which is from gender existentialist to gender queer. And, you know, I found their perspective really just so valuable because they're older than me and they were part of a first wave, they described themselves as a second wave feminist in a time which, you know, was not my time, and it's hard for me to understand how to contextualise myself. But I want to read you a couple of sentences that they've written as well. I think I, and maybe Western society as a whole, couldn't get to the point of understanding gender diversity until we have taken enough steps along the path of undermining the gender roles that were so rigidly around us. Roles that told us what to wear, how to behave, and what were allowed to study in school, what jobs we were allowed to do, what relationships we were allowed to have, and much more. The culture for young people is different now, with many of these conventions broken, and so with many possibilities of gender and sexuality to find a place in. Queer community now is a place of freedom for many, and seeks to be open to everyone who wants it. So there's a real movement there that I can see that they've experienced that I've just not lived through. And also I found that their experience went a long way to explaining, how the makings of the feminist movement can lead to a sense of wanting to defend that space around those of us who then came to identify as non-binary. And also Al explains why they had a good female feminist identity for a while, so they thought, and then began to realise that the boundaries of that were not sufficient to hold them. So I think what was important to me as well was kind of a bit broader than what was queer and what was gender in the book. What was also important was that this being invited to a sense of the non-binary as a whole. I sort of found myself thinking there's a lot to learn from people who can't be defined. And it helped me really to decide not to decide a few things that I otherwise might have decided on. And I think that, it's a bigger thing to decide to keep uncertainty than it is just to fall on a decision that we might later on never get around to reviewing. So I think, at first it felt weird to me to present this book because I've really been surprised by how much it's meant to me. And I've been surprised as well by how much it's meant to other people, and not just because I've written a chapter. And when I first wrote the chapter, before I even sent it to the publisher, I sent it around to a few friends. And the first person who got back to me said, "You know what, everybody needs to read this." And I thought, gosh, really? And then another person came back independently with the same sentiment. And I really believe, that ends up having not as much to do with my quality as a writer than how much need there is in this moment for us to have a space to be with people who can't answer the question of who they are fully. Because I think that's what we need to do as a planet as well. So yeah, I kind of, and then I was really surprised because in LGBT month in 2020, which was when this came out, it got #1 top pick for a book to read in LGBT month. BTQ, I don't know how The Independent does it, but anyway, I think it was Q and plus actually. So that's me really, and thank you for listening. So that's worth mentioning actually. So I think it is the standard. You can get it on Amazon and all good bookshops. In The Independent, they mentioned that it's available through Blackwell. But the other thing that I should say is it's published by Jessica Kingsley Publishing, and I was unaware of this publisher until the book, and then I realised I really should have been aware of them because I just want to read everything in their back catalogue. They're the publisher for Meg-John Barker, who's one of the editors of this book as well, who's just brought out Life Isn't Binary and How to Understand Your Gender and Rewriting the Rules, a relationship book. And I think they're just a fantastic publisher for taking people's voices and putting them where they need to be, and they really don't accept work that is about a minority group that's not by that minority group. So I should say that about the book as well, that it's by a great publisher that you should look into. Yeah, sure. So I think I used to have this joke that when you go to a non-binary meetup, there's always somebody saying, "I'm more non-binary than you." And I think I wasn't aware that I could be that person. you know, because I was the person who came up with the joke. So it made me realise that I had ideas about how I was as non-binary that were like, right, that's how you do it. So I don't know, and I think that when we're afraid, polarising is a very clear thing that happens when we're afraid, because I think that, you know, the more uncertain things become, the more comforting it is to just grab a viewpoint and stick to it, and I think we're seeing that now globally. But I think I had this idea that if I could get an identity which I could present solidly, then that would work for me. And as a visual designer, I was quite specific about that. You know, I had this whole year in 2019. No, it was earlier than that. I had like a year where I was subverting menswear with fluff. So I had like a fluffy tie. And, you know, I had these things that were kind of very deliberate statements. And there was this idea that I needed to announce what was going on, or I couldn't expect other people to accept me. And that probably was the biggest thing that was challenged overall, that I was seeing people in this work whose their gender was centred in their thoughts, or their gender was centred in their writing. And their identity it had a different gravitational pull to mine. And I think, you know, in a way I sort of reconciled that, but I guess my response was to knit the non-binary scarf, because I sort of held this one position for so long of the fluffy tie, and that was it, really. That was my one non-binary look. And then I knitted this scarf which had, you know, these natural colours which we tend to associate with men. We tend to associate more like and less bright colours with men, I've noticed. And then I had, you know, some bright but kind of male colours, and then the queer edge, you see. And the idea with the scarf is you can fold it any way you want to. So like one day it can be like this, and another day you can be like a little bit more blending in with a conventional culture. So I don't know, I sort of answered it by building myself a flexible identity, but I still felt the need to do it through visuals. Is that an answer? If that was a question, this was an answer.